I love that recording in progress. Lets you know someone else.
Yeah, that it opens up. Morning, Adrian. Good
Good
morning.
morning. Happy Monday.
It's Monday. Yes, it is. Another Monday. And our Dolphins lost this weekend. So let's not
Did you
talk
watch
about
that?
football.
I know you watched the game. I was going back and forth. They had my emotions in an uproar because they did some cool stuff, and then something happened, and you're like, great, that was for nothing. Exciting game, if nothing else. Disappointing that they gave it away at the end, but all right, that
Uh,
happened.
they need to do something. I'm some people say I'm forever cheering for the Dolphins that are not winning anything. So we'll see.
Ugh,
I know. Very disappointing, but nonetheless, it is the way I get to spend time with my son. So I did
love
get
that.
son
By the
time.
way,
I get Logan
he
time.
got a little bit more facial hair than the last time I saw him.
A little, you think? My boy needs a haircut.
Good stuff. All right.
All right, let's jump in. Well, you wanted to share before
I
we
was
get
going to
into this,
say,
Adrian, talk to us about this date in history because you did
I
have
can't
something
help it,
good.
but so I've started looking at this day in history. That it actually ends up being this month in history. So I'm going to take us way back. Back in 1906 was actually the first wave of model homes that exploded onto the American landscape. Builders prior to this, and some of you might remember this, you've read it or seen it. They had like the Sears catalog homes, and people would buy a home based on a couple of pictures, and then they would actually build this. Yep, there was an American consumer that got their hands in there and built their own homes. We are way past that. But the point is that builders realized that a well-staged home could captivate buyers, as powerfully as just the price alone. You guys have heard this phrase, right? The picture is worth 1,000 words. Remember, buyers form their first impressions in seconds. Staging has evolved, and it's now more about creating an experiential narrative that helps the buyers see themselves living there, right? It's selling the lifestyle of that property. And so, all I just wanted to offer is that remember, it's beyond just strategic stating. It's staging. I keep saying stating, staging. It means decluttering. It means repairs when necessary. The consumer is looking to you to be the person that says, hey, this repair absolutely needs to get dealt with. The colors, while nice for you, we should neutralize them. Neutral colors, neutral decor, professional photographies. I can't tell you how much I see them on the MLS when I see these photos of $500,000 properties. And I'm not saying these things don't take good photos. I'm just saying, are we doing the consumer the justice that requires? Uploading the floor plans, the virtual tours when you can, they all tell a compelling story before the consumer even steps inside, and it helps that property stand out in a sea of properties, which we've been talking about for weeks. All right, that's my time. That's this month in history.
All right, Adrian. So now that you told us staging has been around for about 100 years,
Yes.
talk to us about what we're seeing in this current century. Right now, we're in Dade County single family homes, and my first blink is it looks like a carbon copy of the prior week.
Yeah,
We have not
pretty
seen,
much. And so
yeah.
some of the narrative you'll hear us talk about a little bit is that, yep, price decreases are up, new to market is on par with previous week's reportings. And I want to make sure that everybody hears this. Active and pendings are up, closed just up a tick from last, and that's an important component as we move through these segments.
Yeah, I think it's important to note in the single family homes, both in Dade and I'll move over to Broward, um, is we're seeing something different in that market than we are seeing in the condo and townhouse market. And
Yep.
that is a lot of the inventory that is coming on the market, because it is coming on, it is being absorbed. It's not all being absorbed. It's not 100% being absorbed, but it's not creating a gigantic backlog of inventory that's just sitting there. What I would love to share, because it ties into what you just said, and that is a quick little study that I did of our listings over the last, I guess that was a week and a half ago. I sat and looked online and looked at some of our listings in the MLS and said, what's the difference between those that are under contract, pending, active with contract, as well as what's active and what's the difference? And forget pricing, because I wasn't going to sit and start analyzing over
Sure.
500 properties to figure it out. And the difference was what you just spoke about early on was the staging, how they were appearing. And so there is no longer an excuse for us to have any ugly photos online. Number one, never with your own camera, but number two, with the physical staging and or virtual staging, that is a must for every single property that's out there at this point. And there's so much available free software now that there's no reason why every property shouldn't at least at a minimum that. And I did notice what my conclusion was is that everything that was pending was either a renovated property or had been physically or virtually staged. And everything that was active was in need of significant photo upgrades at a minimum, because the property probably needed some. So that's what I saw. And I looked at a lot of single family homes that day.
You know what, what amazes me, all that data, all that information, and you, I know that we talked about it last week. I think you even showed, if I remember correctly, you even showed the difference in two photos that you just said, hey, and to a, to an AI, hey, just give me the difference of what this would look. And I think you called it something modern, the word you used. Again, my whole point to this is that the majority of consumers, when they get into these homes, regardless of how they look, they end up doing their own upgrades. So could you imagine? I'll take this phrase straight from one of our agents. Patty actually gave this to me. It is hard enough in this market to sell a really good looking, well priced home. So when you add the fact that that you should stage it or that you should go the extra mile to make it more appealing to that consumer, that's the extra mile that most agents aren't going through, or that do the different, I think is what I'm hearing
Yeah.
you say.
Yeah, 100% do the different. Now, that is absolutely making a difference on the single family homes. And I think that's why you're seeing that
Yep.
absorption staying strong. Now we're over here, we're moved into the condo and townhouse market, and that's kind of where we see a little bit of a different story, right? We're seeing significant amount of inventory still coming on the market,
Mhm.
and not nearly that number being taken down, right? So our
Correct. The
between our
absorption rate is
pending and
lower on this. Yep.
yeah, significantly lower, which means we're stacking inventory in the categories, and we know that for all the reasons we know um, that it's coming on the markets.
Natasha, if I can take 2 seconds, you and I had a conversation earlier, and I had asked, hey, what are some of the reasons you think that might be affecting the influx of inventory in this market? And without going through that whole layer, I think what's important to take away, if we can, just one quick second on this, is that from the agent's side, right, as the one who aids and helps and guides our consumers through these markets, whether you have the seller who is saying, hey, look, I've got to put my house on the market, it's important to know why these inventory levels are on the rise, right? So if you're studying this and you're doing this at a high level, is it cost of living for that consumer? Is it the taxes? Is it the insurance? Maybe it's the opportunity to reduce their debt obligations on second or third properties, or even in some cases, their primaries. It's in understanding these reasons that you, as the agent, become a crucial role in this phase of our markets, helping our consumers and guiding them through beyond just the price point, whether it's helping them understand more creative finance or lending approaches, which opens up to one of the categories we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I think if we look at it, one of the things that I wanted to bring up, Adrian, was the bridge loans, like ungluing part of our industry, right? So one of the areas where we're stuck is we've got a scenario now where you've got people in a product category or type that are potentially move up or even move down buyers at this point.
Sure.
And in order to unstick them, they've got a property to sell. So we did have a couple of scenarios come up in the last few days where people were saying, well, I don't know how to do this. I've never had this before. I've got a subject to, right? I've got a buyer who would like to buy another property, but they've got another property to sell. And so there, I want to encourage our listing agents out there to prepare sellers that you will now encounter buyers. As rates have started to come down just a little, you will encounter buyers who are going to now move away from the home that they're in, move up to the next one, but can't move on it until they've sold the first one. So they'll be subject to, but knowing what products are available, knowing that there are things like bridge loans that are available, knock programs that are available, ways for a consumer to take the equity from the property that they're living in, not create themselves two payments at the same time, and be able to free up that equity so that they can move on. Make sure that you're educating yourselves and speak to your lending partners about it, because we're going to see more of this. It just is what we're gonna see, is my
So
suspicion.
yeah, I'm smiling for a whole different reason. Of course, my brain does this. You said, hey, there's this consumer, right? The seller who let's just assume for a moment they're getting at least traction on the house that they're listing, right? It's priced well enough for them to at least have someone look at it. We heard stuff a couple of weeks ago like reverse offer, which, hey, this is the market where whether they submitted an offer or not, send the offer out. And for those of you who are familiar with or may have never heard of a kickout clause, this is your time to get really familiar with it because as the listing agent, you may be in a great position to present this as an option so that the seller, number one, the seller can say yes and get under contract, and the buyer has some maneuverability to get through this process and get their home sold.
Yeah, 100%. So knowing all the options that are available, like this is a market where we have to really think differently and think of different ways that we can make things happen. So now I moved out of Dade County. I moved over into the Broward, almost called it Brawnard, the Broward condo and townhouse market. That's a tongue twister. And the story is very similar in terms of
Mhm.
inventory, and our price decreases like outstripping the new inventory coming on, which is just again, getting them priced right when we come on the market in this category is critically important. And for all the reasons, and we don't see a slowdown happening here.
Right.
I think Adrian, you and I had a sort of a sidebar conversation about why are we still seeing so much inventory hit the markets right now, or maybe it normally doesn't at this time of the year. And the
Mhm.
truth is, I don't see a slowdown happening in that right now. As long as we're still dealing with the effects of Surfside, I mean, it's going to take us a few years to filter through this, right? And
Sure.
affordability is an issue. So when people are making choices, maybe that second or third property that is not being utilized in Florida like they thought is probably, going to be the first sacrificial lamb to come on the markets and move off. And so that's why we're still seeing that.
Makes sense. Okay.
All right. So many of you are joining us today because of the news that we shared that we've got a new partnership. And we wanted to share with you all this really cool new information. This is something that is exclusive to our market centers. It is a partnership that we have done through KW Default Solutions, and it is a partnership with Hubzu. So, like, what is Hubzu? Now, if you've been around for 10, 15 years in real estate, you might recall this organization because they were around during the great meltdown in real estate, right? And so at the time, and so we're talking 2008, 2007, 8, 9, right? At that time, the many consumers would, or many lenders at the time would use this as an alternate disposition. And so because of the onslaught of inventory that the lenders back in the REO days had, they would put property out on an auction site. And so that was one type of consumer or one type of listing that would go on an auction site. Then the exact opposite end of the spectrum. Then you had the very high end of the market, the ultra high net worth properties that were unique and unusual. And many sellers at that level chose to go the route of auction. Auction is actually becoming more and more of a tool that is being utilized, that I think for the biggest reason today is transparency.
So you say transparency. So I was going to ask you a two-part question, but then you added this phrase. So I heard you say distressed property for the historical value that's when we saw it. Do you mind just walk me through who's the consumer that this benefits?
So if I am the seller of a prop, well, it benefits everybody. So here's the deal. If I'm a seller, it allows me, there's two types of auctions that exist out there, right? So one is considered an absolute auction. And an absolute auction basically means if I put something up for auction for an opening bid of $1, as an example,
Hmm.
and I get $1.50, it's absolute. It's going to sell for that $1.50. That was my highest bid, right?
Okay.
That's what's called an absolute auction. Then there is something which is what these type of platforms or this partnership with Hubzu is, which is a reserve auction, which means the seller's in control. The seller gets to choose what their final price is. The opening bid, let's pretend in this case, the seller's price was $10, right? But the
Mhm.
opening bid is $1. And let's just say hypothetically, after the auction closes, the highest bid is $7. Well, this is not an absolute auction. The seller still had a $10 reserve, which means nobody gets the property. It continues to stay on the market for sale. And so we'll go through a whole training class on how the Hubsu Advantage works for the seller. It is a two-pronged approach. The property would go on the auction site, but it would still also be in the MLS. You can read all the stats for yourselves. I'm not going to read the stats.
Okay.
In the auctions, the way it actually works is that a seller puts their property on. There's paperwork that's required. There's all sorts of stuff. A buyer is the one that actually pays the fee on the online auction portals. And so there is a buyer premium. The partnership with Hubsu in that buyer premium is the listing agent will actually receive a portion, 1% of that buyer's premium will actually come back to the listing agent. We'll have a full class on how
Sure.
this works, how you do it, the paperwork that's required, what needs to happen, what the seller needs to be aware of in the next 2 weeks. And we will absolutely market that and invite you all to that.
Before you move on, you mentioned something that I think it's critically important for those of us on the call today. You said transparency. Like there's one more layer, right? So am I getting this right? The seller that puts this property on this platform gets to see the activity. The buyer gets to see the activity, creating some might call FOMO. Am I crazy, or is that what I'm hearing?
No, that's 100% correct, Adrian. The benefit and so what happens is because it is an online auction, it's that eBay effect, right? People will be able to see that there are other people bidding. There is a dollar amount that these auctions on the back end go up by. So if it's 1,000 or 5,000, whatever that trigger number is on the back end that it goes up by,
Sure.
but it is a purely transparent process. So a buyer knows, oh, I'm bidding up against 3 other people, or I'm the only one bidding on this property. And so that also lets a buyer make a decision, a well-informed decision of, oh my gosh, this is a highly desirable property. I might want to go up higher because I don't want to lose this,
Got it.
versus a non-auctioned option. So again, just another option, not a requirement, but another option and another advantage that our agents will have in the marketplace. So it's just
Perfect.
another tool in the tool belt to take and an opportunity for an agent to have additional income created as a result of it.
Makes sense. Awesome.
And no additional cost to our sellers at all. So awesome. I am going to, Adrian, I don't know if you want to thank our partners, but I'm going to drop the screen for a second because I want to
Yeah.
talk to our
No, as
people.
always, we want to thank our partners in business for all that they do and how they serve our agents. All right.
Team, I've dropped the screen because I really want to speak to you all. I want to speak to you from my heart. I decided to do it at the end of our call as opposed to the beginning of our call. It's been a tough and heavy week. As a human being, as a Christian, as an American, as a mom, as a wife, my heart has been burdened and I found myself quieter than usual this last week. And you may have noticed because I was pretty absent from social media. Part of that was intentional. The noise, the opinions, the narratives, they came rushing in from every side. And I had to stop and remind myself of something that I already knew because not every voice is trustworthy. Not every story is the whole story. Look, team, we've seen that in our own industry. We were the victims of that a year ago. Remember the narrative that was told on the real estate industry over a year ago? And it gave me clarity. That reminder reminded me of the clarity that I needed to pause and think for myself. And I need to encourage you all to do the same. You see, here's what I see today. I see today that people are hurting. People are pointing fingers instead of reflecting inward. Negative news travels so fast, and so often we find ourselves wishing the worse for others when simply they see the world differently than we do. But friends, that's not our way forward. That's how division grows further. I believe that this moment is bigger than any one of us. I believe there's a deeper battle here of good and evil at play. And in this kind of moment, it is our job not to fight with each other, but to love on each other. Pick up your phones, call somebody in your circle, and offer them encouragement. We need to remind people that they matter. I'm not asking you to believe what I believe. That's the beauty of this country. We get to choose. But I'm asking you to give yourself enough space to say, you know what? I never thought about it like that. That's how our growth begins. We're in this together. Whether we like it or not, our future is bound. Many of you know that Jamaica holds a special place in my heart. Yes, the people, but it's not just the beaches, the food, and the music, because all of those things are true. But what moves me is their motto, out of many, one people. I believe that to be true for America too. Out of many, we are one. And above all, I believe we are children of God. And one day each of us will stand before him as the only true judge. My prayer is simple, and that he will say, well done, my good and faithful child. I love you all, and I hope that in the days ahead, it brings us peace, healing, and a renewed sense of unity as we move forward together. May God bless each and every one of you and keep you safe. I love you, team. Hug those around you and hold them tight. And may you all stay safe. Have a beautiful week.